So now that this cube is functioning the way that we want, we can duplicate the cube. I'm just going to take my good cube and do a quick Command D, or I could right click on it and tell it to duplicate, and I'll just make a couple of instances of this, or a couple copies of this same cube, and just see how this holds up as I run across and pick up several cubes. So I can see my health keeps getting increased as I pick up those cubes, and I got a little flaw that I probably don't want to exceed 100 for my health. I want to keep my scale 0 to 100. So I'll correct for that in just a moment. But I am going to take a duplicate of this cube, and I'm going to just modify this a little bit. Instead of it being a good cube, we'll set it up as a bad cube. And I will also apply the red material to it. So at this point it has the same functionality, because when I duplicated that bad cube, it inherited this same state machine that we created, which is great because it works almost exactly the way we want it. The only difference is that in state 2, rather than adding 10 to our health, we could do one of two things. We could add a negative 10 to our health. Don't want to do that per second. And let's see if this works. So I'll just find that red cube. My health is currently at 80, and so when I run into the red cube, it disappears and my health goes down to 70. That works just the way that I want. Again, alternatively, what I could have done is gone into the bad cube, and I could have added a simple math function in here and found float subtract. And we could do a float subtract on player health and just type in 10 here. But we're essentially doing the same thing. So let me just click on this little cog here, and let's remove that action that I just added, because the float add negative 10 works just the way that just as well. So I'll make a couple of other duplicates of this so I can continue to test this. Now, the only other thing that I think we want to be mindful of is that on our player manager over here, where'd you go? Player manager. We could limit our player health to have a maximum value of 100, or we could have a minimum and a maximum value of 0 to 100. I'm not so concerned about the lower end value, but I really don't want this to exceed 100. And in the math function, I can do a quick float clamp. And we can do that. I'll probably do this just before it gets printed to screen. And the float clamp, what we could do is clamp the variable of player health to have a maximum value of 100. Okay, and we could do that every frame. And so the idea here is that when I hit play, if I already have the value of 100 health, my health does not exceed 100, so it gets clamped to 100. And that's just kind of a little maintenance thing if we don't want our health going up above 100. There's other ways that we could do this. We could build a manual function that checks to see if the health is greater than or equal to 100 and just set it back to 100, but that's essentially what clamp is doing. So there's a nice little built-in function there. So that seems to be working pretty well. We can clamp our health from 0 to 100. And then the other thing that we could do is we could build in some functionality based on seeing if we exceed 100, we could have something else happen, or if our health actually gets to 0 or lower, we could do something else, like we could cause the character to die. So let's set up a real quick scenario where if our player health is equal to or less than 0, we send our game into a real simple death screen. And so the way that we'll do this is we want to do a float compare, and I believe that is under logic. Let's take a look. Logic. I don't see. Let me type in compare. Float compare, it is under logic. I guess I just didn't see it. So let me just pick it up from here. We'll do a float compare. And what I want to do is compare one float to another. And one of the floats that I want to compare is the global player health. And I want to compare that to 0. And I'll leave a 0 tolerance here. That's fine. And if it's equal or less than 0, I want to fire off an action. And so I'll create a custom event here, and I'll just say is dead, and we'll add that as a transition, and I'll add another state and wire the is dead over to state 2. If we go back to state 1 and do a float compare, we're comparing the global player health to 0. That's the second float that we're comparing it against. Its current value is 80. And so if it gets equal to 0, we want to fire off is dead, but we'll also do less than. So if if for some reason our health ends up lower than 0, we're also dead. And we could check that every frame. And so what we'll do here is, let's see, do I have enough bad cubes to get to 0? I don't. So what I'm going to do is, rather than making 8 cubes that would get us to the required 80 or 0, because remember our health is 8, we're starting off at 8. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into variables. I'm going to go to global variables. I'm going to grab player health, and I'm going to set the initial float value to something like 20. And so when I do that, what I can do is, you'll see that if I go back and just look at the state, my initial value for player health is 20. So if I pick up 2 cubes, 2 red cubes, I should fire off that second state in my player manager. There it goes. I can see it happen down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And so at this point, I have a simple mechanism in place that checks to see if my health is less than 0 or equal to 0, and if so, I can fire off the state, which will ultimately have some other actions that if the player character is dead. So at this point, I'll just do a real simple GUI label. So I'll just use the search here, and we'll just do a GUI label. Oops, I got to select my state, state 2, GUI label, and this text I'll just say, you are dead. And we'll do this, well, for this I'll do it right in the middle of the screen, so that's 0.5 from the left and 0.5 from the top. And we'll test this really quick. We'll hit the play button. Let me see if I can grab a couple of these red cubes, and there we go. I'm dead. It says so on screen. So I'm dead. Of course, I can build some more functionality into this to actually do some things when I'm dead. But for now, I have that basic health mechanism in place where I'm picking up good cubes to increase my health. I'm picking up bad cubes to decrease my health, and of course, I can repurpose these mechanics and add the red cubes to things like water or lava or other places that I don't want to, things that I want to avoid. And of course, I can turn off the mesh renderer so I can make it look just like the environment here, a place. If I don't want to touch this water, if I want that water to start taking away from my health, I could just take one of these cubes or repurpose that state machine and apply it to something else that has a geometry or a trigger to it. So that's a way to get a basic health system up and running inside Playmaker, and we'll continue to add to this and tweak it and make it a little bit more complex and a little bit more full-featured, but at least that should get you up and running with the basic core concept. So we'll keep pushing this stuff forward in future presentations.